Is there a bit of a delay after I talk before? Is there a delay between us talking?
Probably.
Yeah, there is, because it took a while for you to answer that. Okay, so I'll just keep that in mind and just make sure I wait long enough for you to answer. Okay. All right,
Okay.
so I have some questions already prepared, but I want this more like a conversation, even though it's going to be in written format. So I may change the questions as we go along. So are you ready to begin?
I am ready to begin.
Fabulous. Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so very, very much for agreeing to the interview and for agreeing to do it in this format. It's a little bit different, but if it all works out, it'll be fabulous. And I know, Jeff, you can't answer, but thank you so much for offering to do this for us, because it's going to help me tremendously and perhaps add a new dimension to the magazine. So let's get started. So, Lisa, on September 11th, 2001, which is now known as 9/11, the whole world changed. However, your world changed a lot more significantly than most. So would you please give us a snapshot of what happened to you on 9/11?
Well, in a nutshell, my husband, Teddy, who I had been married to for almost 11 years, was in the North Tower on the 105th floor and was there the morning it was hit and fell. So I lost him.
That must have been quite the shock for you to come home from taking your children to school to find this happened.
Yes, it was. It was a normal day. It was the second week of school. My daughter was 7 and had just started second grade here. And my youngest son was 4 months old and my middle guy was 4 years old. And we walked into the house, having taken Jennifer to school a little late because she had been feeling unwell. And when I walked in the door, the phone was ringing and I picked it up and a friend said to me, "Lisa, what tower is Teddy in?" And I said, "The one with the antenna on it. Why?" And she said, then I quote, "Well, turn on the TV because a plane just hit it and took off the top 15 floors." She did not ask me what floor he was on because he was 2 stories from the top. So the information she gave me, if it's possible to make something worse, a bad situation worse, I had him dead on the ground in my mind. So I turned on the television and saw the building still standing. So I was actually relieved in this, that split second moment. But then I saw the black smoke and I knew there was really no surviving that. So that began a long, many days of doubt, and then finding out the reality, watching the buildings fall that morning and sifting through the rubble and, basically finishing what we all knew had started that morning.
Absolutely. And just what a tragic thing to happen. Just, in general, it affected the world. It definitely affected the United States and affected a lot of families. So it's real tragedy. Now, you recently launched your book, The Light in 9/11, Shocked by Kindness and Healed by Love. What do you mean by shocked by kindness? Can you explain that?
Sure. So at the time when I just turned 41 the week before 9/11, and I had expectations of my family helping me if tragedy ever occurred, or, who would be there for me, who would take care of me if something happened. And I had been cultured that it was really my parents and family. And the truth was, my family was so broken already. My parents and my extended family were so broken already that they were of actually no help to me at all. They actually made the situation worse. And it was the kindness, I was shocked by the amount of love and kindness I was given by not only my community, but by strangers around the world. And it's that love energy, that incredible surprise that came because I had no expectations of anyone outside of my family, that it literally shocked me into healing. It gave me enough to support me for long enough that I actually ultimately was able to heal over the years that followed.
Well, most of us learn that our families are not always there for us. It usually is friends and strangers. So I'm glad that you had that experience. I have a broken family too, so I really feel for you and understand your expectations, but what your reality. So I'm really happy that you have that. So I'm not putting that in the interview. I'm just telling you that.
Well, for those who no, well, thanks. No, and it's the truth being that, we're on the path we're on to figure out what we're here to figure out. And all of these experiences are just directing us down the path. And, I'm grateful to be here and complete and whole and having figured out a lot given the obstacles that were in my way. So it was all good.
Mm. Absolutely. So, of course, there were other families that were affected, like your family was by 9/11, and no doubt they also received the same kindness that you and your family received. So, how does your story differ than others? In other words, how did you get to the positive perspective you have? How did you get to the light in 9/11?
Well, it actually, which is the story in the book, is actually within a couple hours after the buildings fell. My story is unique because I was very uniquely prepared for Ted's death. He had walked down from the first bombing in February of 1993. He worked for the same company at that time and walked down the 105 floors of the North Tower, which took about 4.5 hours. And so I dealt with terrorism already. I had already dealt with it once before. And that's when I got really, really, really angry. But what's interesting is in that time, no one else seemed to care or get angry or even give it much notice. Everything was swept under the rug and people just went back to normal. So on a subconscious level, they went back into 2 enormous targets. And I wasn't thinking of it consciously, but, they would joke and say like, wow, if it happens again, we'll go to the roof. Wow, if it happens again, we'll have gas masks in our desks. We'll have parachutes in our desks. Well, we'll just back up and say, wait a minute. If it happens again, are you kidding? Really? Okay, so just start there. But we think we're invincible. That's how we are as humans. And then the second thing that prepared me was that my husband's family had lost their father very young. As a result, his mother was very worried about Ted's health. He had high cholesterol by nature. He was a little bit overweight. He was stressed, out of his mind because he was working on Wall Street. And we'd come out of the 80s and 90s model where there wasn't any meditation yet. It was just push, 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 push for more money. And that was supposed to make you happy. And so he was under enormous stress. And his mother basically thought he was going to die of a heart attack. So every time I saw her for 10 years, she told me how worried she was that he was going to have a heart attack. As a result, I ran his death through my mind hundreds of times. And I would get myself just as worked up in the middle of the night as if the event had happened itself. And that's what's really interesting. And the point of the book and the point of this conversation is life is always preparing you for what's coming next. And it's not the good stuff that's preparing you. It's the hard stuff that's preparing you. And the truth is, your mind is so powerful that I could conjure that level of pain, of his death, of his loss, of what it looked like to raise my children alone, almost completely in my imagination. So on the morning of 9/11, when he did actually die, I was 2 steps ahead of everybody else because I had already processed that. I was shocked as could be. I brokenhearted. I mean, it was the love of my life, my soulmate, my best friend for, just immediate best friend when we met. So the loss was devastating, but I could not get my head around it. Because the shock was just way too big. So I was more in the shock of the event itself, that our country was being attacked, that we were now experiencing terrorism on this magnificent level that was just mind-numbing, and just getting your head around it. So I looked around my room, my dining room at the time. So now it's about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock on Tuesday morning, the 11th, and I could see that my friends were just desperate in their pain, just desperate in their fear, and spinning in circles and asking me, what can I do? What can I do? What do you need? And the truth is that nobody could do anything for anyone. This was completely out of our hands. And we didn't even know, right? We assumed he was, because he was above the fire, but it would be days, weeks before we really knew. And, so people are asking me, and I could see they were just so upset, but I was fine. I was in this very strange, calm, surreal, heightened awareness that shock and trauma give you. I was also the nursing mother of a 4-month-old, and nature doesn't let you go down. You're a mother, you're staying up. You've got to take care of your kids. Within minutes of 9/11, my single focus was my children. Nothing else mattered. I just had to get them through this. So that's your nature. That's your warrior that shows up. And, we all have that warrior, and people are so worried about what they're going to be. And they think I'm so strong. I'm no stronger than anyone else. I just happen to have it happen to me. And I had this strange preparation. So you ask about the other families. Well, in that moment of understanding how much pain my friends were in that were around me, I realized the only way I could help them was to let them help me. And a voice of all knowing, like knowledge, literally, said to me, let them help you. And now I'm from the 60s, 70s, 80s feminist role model. You don't ask for help. We're capable and powerful, and women can do everything, right? We don't need any help. We're going to muscle through it. Well, the last thing I wanted to do is have anyone's help. So by surrendering, listening to that voice, listening to that inner knowing, by surrendering to it and walking through that metaphoric door to allow people to help me, I was overwhelmed with the feelings of gratitude, humility, and love that I have never, ever lost. They've been with me ever since. And I could not stop seeing the positive in everything from that moment on.
Wow, that's incredible. Most people would, of course, bury their heads and be miserable. And so kudos to you for pulling through. So in the book, and of course, I don't want to give away too much of the book because I want people to read the whole experience. You did share that the night before the 9/11 attacks that you and your husband had the largest argument in your marriage, and you actually asked for divorce. Do you feel that perhaps this was your intuition warning you of what was going to happen the next day, and you were subconsciously perhaps pushing him away as if to put you in defense mode or to ease your pain?
I've never really thought about it that way, but I would not argue with any theory on that. I'll be honest, we were both in such a bad place. We had just had our third unexpected pregnancy in our 40s. His job, they couldn't figure out how to compensate a new position within his company. So money was tight, and he was miserable. I was miserable. We knew what we were in for with a new child. A third child, you move from, man to man to zone defense, as the joke is, from going from 2 to 3 kids. And, I looked at him that summer, and I could tell he was just done. And they say that the soul knows when it's leaving. And it could have been then. I don't know that the fight we had was more my postpartum frustration and depression, and our lack of communication in our marriage that just blew. I was being dramatic and asking him for a divorce, but I was really unhappy and really angry, which many people can relate to that place when you have these 3 little kids and, you're the mother at home and you've once worked and used your mind, and now you are in this mind-numbing drudgery of motherhood that isn't going to end anytime soon. And, you know, I hate to admit it, I love and adore my children and always have, but I found early child motherhood to be very, very difficult.
So now the end result is you now have a business purely because of 9/11. So would you tell us a little bit about your business?
Okay, so we've jumped over a huge part, which is I basically realized within like a week, less than a week or so after 9/11, I realized that well, let me back up. That morning, I had three very prescient thoughts. I knew our world was changed forever. It had literally shifted on its axis. I knew it would be 2 years until we were anywhere near a new normal. And I knew that all I could do was put my head down and go and stay in the moment, one day at a time, and just do what was in front of me. And I had a job that prepared me for that. So I was really in this weirdly prepared place. Within that time, I vowed to myself and anyone who would have listened, but I don't think I said it out loud, that I would make something good come from 9/11. That there was no way in the world I would let Teddy and all the others die in vain. That if that was the case and I didn't do something to make it good, then then the terrorists would have won. And that was completely unacceptable to me. The only way I could fight back was to figure out the why of everything. So I look at 9/11 as the equivalent of having every emotional bone in your body broken simultaneously. If it was your physical body, you would go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor for my mind. And I lay for 4 years, I went through full analytic analysis to figure it out. Figure out my life, why it was so dysfunctional, what it was, what was my role in it. Just put it all on a table, peeling back layer after layer after layer after layer. Until finally I broke through the ceiling to mental health one day about 4 years in and downloaded a brand of kindness. So what you're asking me about, my little company is a company of a made-up word called Cozmeena, which is spelled Cozmeena. And Cozmeena is to kindness as Xerox is to copiers or Kleenex is to facial tissue. It's a made-up word meaning that thing. So it's about enlightenment, and it's about living an enlightened life and living a life where we live in the moment with gratitude, humility, and grace, where there is no judgment or criticism of ourselves or others, and where kindness and love is the golden rule. And if you can live there, which is where I've been for the last, 13 years, it is absolutely heaven on earth. And it's not, it doesn't mean it's easy. It just means I'm detached from the outcome. I'm just watching life unfold. And it is absolute joy, even in its pain. And this is what I would wish for everyone. And that's why I've written the book, which is the first of 3 books, to explain how to get there.
Fantastic. I actually had some other questions, but I jumped over them. That's why we missed the middle part. So the question I was going to say, you said that 9/11 set you free. Well, I think you kind of explained that, so I'll put that question before that. Unless you have something else you want to say about that. I don't want you to give away the whole book, but just a highlight.
Well, it gives it away, but I'll be honest with you, Angela, people are reading it twice. I wouldn't worry about it, because it's okay if they don't read
Fabulous.
it either. We just want the message to get there. If they get it through the interview, they get it that way. If they get it by reading it, that's great too, or both.
Okay, good. So now I wanted to ask you, and you did touch upon this in your book too, but 9/11 happened 17 years ago. I can't believe the 17th anniversary is just on top of us. Why did you wait so long to share your story? Why now? Why not earlier?
Well, I wasn't really finished earlier. It's taken me, I LLC'd, I created the company in 2007. It took me 2 years to process the download, basically. And it's got so many facets. It's so complicated and so dimensional that I couldn't even explain it to you succinctly even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So it's all been processing. And I think because it's being delivered in perfect timing, we all know perfect divine timing, right? So it wasn't until I had to wait until people could even conceive of a positive side of 9/11. I mean, the wound is still so fresh for some people. I'm shocked by that. I'm really surprised, but no one has really processed it in a healthy way emotionally. So it's still very much right under the surface. And it's the root of a lot of, I believe that to be that lack of processing and that fear of terror, the terroristic fear that has lodged itself now at a cellular level has been running free for the last 17 years. And it's why, one of the foundational reasons why the world feels so out of control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we live our lives entirely of fear, but of course that's what the terrorists want, and it's people like you that pull us out of that fear. And we need to hear your story. We need to find out what you've done to give others hope and belief in themselves that they can also do the same thing. Now, you are constantly growing and evolving. Your book shares your full story, which is absolutely amazing. And you just said it took so long to share your story because it wasn't finished. Well, I get a strong sense it's still not finished. Where else do you see yourself going? What else do you expect to do from now, moving forward?
Well, so the Cosmina brand, when I had the download, I knew it would be 30 years until it was a household word. And, anyone who's intuitive, who studies enlightenment and spirituality, understands intuition, understands the knowing. And I just have knowing. I don't hear voices, I don't see angels, but I believe in all of it. I believe everybody is prescient, and the fifth dimension is very present with us. The energetic realm is here all the time. So it just shows up through us in different ways. And in my case, 9/11, the trauma of 9/11 blew me so wide open, I was able to receive. And without any obstacles, it just flowed right in. And so 4 years later, after peeling back the intellectual and psychological aspects of my life, it cleared away the rest of it. And this creative download came that was just remarkable. It lasted for 2 years. And I literally, I could go into many details, but we would take this conversation, way off in a different direction. But knowing that it was going to be a long run, I knew that each year would mean something in its evolution. So when I basically actualized the company 5 years ago in the form of teaching women to knit as a functional meditation. And that's a long story. That's in the book as well. And that's about finding comfort through your 5 senses and using tactile touch to calm your central nervous system. Because of what became, I had the download, and what happened was one morning I was on my therapist's couch, normal everyday morning. I don't know what she said or what I said, but everything fell into place, and I sat bolt upright. And I said, oh my God, we just have to be nice. That's all we have to do is be nice. And in the second breath, and part of that was, we're all the same. Peel our skin off and we're all identical. There is no hierarchy. We are all equal. And we are all intelligent. And the second breath was, oh my gosh, who's taking care of women? Who's taking care of the caregiver? Because myself and all my friends and I were all taking care of, grade school kids, running around like maniacs, never restoring ourselves, never taking any time for ourselves, not getting any help, quite honestly, from men in our lives. I just saw women just doing everything and no one taking care of them, and people being unhappy, pretty unhappy. And, so I started knitting for them, and I started knitting and taking care of the women who had taken care of me. And I made up this pattern for a big triangular shawl. And the third friend I knit for, I'd knit them one at a time as the person came in random order. Would take me a couple weeks. I would think about her the whole time I was knitting, and I took it over to my friend Carol's house, and I put it on her in the way I would wrap it, which was as a big metaphoric hug, because they were big and heavy, and when you wear them, you feel like you're being held. They literally are a full-on sensory experience. And she put it on and went, oh my gosh, this is the coziest thing I've ever worn. It's like a great big hug. And then she caught herself in the mirror and she went, oh, but it's so glamorous. It's so beautiful. It's like a pashmina. No, it's a cosmina. So that's where cosmina came from. It's where coziness meets glamour, or what we say now, it's where kindness meets love. You know, kindness and love come together. So it's all in the same vein, but it's an evolution, like lots of things. You know, it doesn't start at point A, and by the time it's at point Z, it's completely different. But it has grown out of those basic things. And but the ride to deliver it to where it is now has gotten to a place where I was in the third year of knitting, and I realized that I had figured out what I needed to know, and it was a study in women. And it was a study in women giving up their power and coming into my house lost because their kids had gone away for school and they didn't know who they were anymore, and they didn't know why they were here. And they just had to reinvent. And so the knitting really helped bridge that gap. In addition, I recognized how much women were starving for community, that women need each other, and we don't have really any access to women's groups that are, you know, they're popping up everywhere now. So this was just, I was just early in the game, right? I found it's all parallel development. This is all happening simultaneously. I am just one story of millions like it, talking about getting women's groups together, talking about panels and forums, and it's all popping up around the world and certainly around this country. So, so then I realized that my time would be best spent public speaking. And because I'm turning 58 next month, and I have a lot to do in a very little amount of time. And so my best time will be spent talking about it. And I did a query in the 15th anniversary window of 9/11, just on the premise of, can we see 9/11 in a new light? Maybe it was a catalyst that opened our world. And from that, I had 35 radio and television interviews around the country. But what I learned was, in order to be a credible public speaker, you really need to have a book. So I did a TED Talk, which was the perfect first step in writing a book, trying to put together your idea worth sharing, which I recommend for everyone, whether you do it or not, do a TED Talk or not. It's just a great exercise. So without knowing it, that was the precursor to this book. And when I started this book, I did it wrong the first time. I wrote for almost a year and basically threw it away, because that was what they call the brain dump. So really long and short, this is a very long answer. The long and short of it is that this book is the first of 3 books to explain the concept and where we're going.
Very good. You mentioned it was a 30-year project, and I find that very interesting because a generation typically was 20 years, but now people are waiting longer to have children, so a generation is now extending to 25 to 30 years. So do you feel perhaps it's going to take a full generation for the United States and the world, but mostly the United States, to truly fully heal from the events of 9/11? Do you see a correlation in that somehow?
Wow. I think as a culture, so okay, so let me see if I can answer it like this. Book 2, so book 1 is the micro story. It's my memoir. It's what happened to me and my story, and to get people to know me and understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully just trust me. Whether they agree with me or can relate to me, it doesn't matter. What I want them to know is I'm telling them the truth. And I want them to be able to trust me, because the next book is going to be a little leap of faith, and the book after that is going to be a much bigger leap of faith. But I want people to come with me. So I have to meet them where they are, which is why book 1 is the memoir. So book 2 is about the social macro study. And to answer your question, as far as the United States goes, we suffer national adolescence. We are very young. We are 242 years old as of this past July 4th. We really have not been tested. This was our first real test. in the sense of being between two oceans and two benign neighbors. We never feared for people attacking us. So this was a first hit. It was a doozy. Clearly, you know, you don't get bigger than this. So,
Yeah.
you know, but we got hurt and we're still reeling from it. I don't know if some people will ever heal from it. I believe, and my mission is to thwart the stigma of mental health, that we need to absolutely start to serve the emotional component of ourselves. If we expect to survive the terror and the tragedy that's happening, man-made by Mother Nature, that seems to be a daily occurrence now. And we are in fire and brimstone, babe. I mean, we are in the catastrophic, you know, the biblical times right now between the storms and the earthquakes and the fires. You know, but we need to just understand that maybe we're being tested that way. Maybe we're being pushed and shown this until we figure it out. Because we can figure this out. We just haven't ever served our emotional self. We've never filled that third leg of the stool. We've super served physical fitness. We've super served academics, God knows. But, you know, the two questions that prompted this book and the books that follow are, why were we so emotionally unprepared to handle 9/11? And where was all the wise counsel to help us through it? And the answer is we don't have any, because we're too young. We don't have any experience. We needed somebody, instead of going to war the next week, to say, shh, calm down. We all need to calm down. We need to catch our breath and make a plan. Because nothing good happens when you're revved. Reactive behavior just leads to more reactive behavior. But what does it happen if you use the analogy of the high school quarterback, the big, handsome, talented, strong athlete? Well, he's 15, 16 years old. He's a baby still in an adult body. The first time he gets a disappointment, the first time he loses a game, or a girlfriend breaks up with him, or he gets a bad grade, or doesn't get into college, he flips out. He reacts. Well, that's what adolescents are supposed to do. So we are nationally adolescent. We haven't learned to calm down and make a wise plan. But that's what we're learning now, being forced on us.
That's a very, very good way of putting it, that you're in the adolescence years. I also, while I was listening to you explain all that and say all that, it occurred to me that, you know, right now we're in a time of body, mind, and spirit. And the United States, of course, dealt with the body, that's growing the country and establishing their identity as a country, and the mind, and of course that's the learning, that's the education, and now spirit. It's now coming to the emotional component that you were just saying, that you weren't emotionally prepared. So now the focus has switched from the physical important things to now the emotional, which then leads to the spiritual and or religious, depending on your direction. It's forcing you to come to that. So, you know, perhaps that is one of the main reasons this happened, not just because someone was mad at the country, but the greater divine meaning behind this is to get you to that point to prepare and grow out of the physical body and into that emotional, spiritual body. Does that resonate with you?
Well, it completely resonates with me, and I believe it to my core, that we are in this amazing moment in time where we're actually witnessing the evolution of mankind in real time. We are watching the fall of the masculine energy and the influx of the feminine energy, of which we all have both. We know that, right? But the idea of personal power, which is feminine power, meaning you do what you do and I'll do what I do, and we will both be the piece of the puzzle we were here and created to be. And when we do that and we stop trying to conquer each other and win over each other and get some kind of concurrence on what we think, we don't have to agree in order to respect each other. You can mutually agree to coexist and do your thing without domination. And then we're the piece of the puzzle we're meant to be, and all the pieces fall into place and we can actually have harmony. So I believe absolutely that that this is truly divinely being executed. And one of the examples I use is I believe that 9/11 was a birth canal. And if you use the example of the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s, it was birth canal. Well, birth canals are painful and they're bloody and they're scary and they hurt. But eventually something beautiful comes from them. So I realized this when in 2014, I wasn't really paying attention, and poof, all of a sudden we had gay rights. And it's almost as though 30 years later, it takes about 30 years, which is probably the 30-year window more than of the evolution of Cosmina. It probably takes 30 years to really kind of shift thinking. Some healing will be involved with that. But a lot of what happens is the older people die off, the old thinking dies off, and the new thinking is allowed to come in more of a tipping point, in more of a early majority, late majority. You know, you're never going to get complete consensus, but there's going to be a majority that thinks in these terms, especially 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, because the kids are coming. I mean, my kids will be 20 years from now, my kids will be in their 40s. It's their world to inherit. I just have to get out of the way. I have 20 years I might be able to affect something, and then I've aged out. You know, I hope I can be wise counsel to them until the day I die. But the truth is, as a functional adult in this community, you know, your body's, you got about 100 years and we're lucky, you know, so that's why I'm just getting started and I have a lot to do, which is the mission that's pushing this. And I'm actually being pulled into it. I shouldn't even say it's effortless. It's just something I have to do.
Excellent, excellent. I think you are a perfect, wise person for the next generations and for our world. And thank you very much for being strong enough to do that and put that out there. That's for sure. So I think we should wrap this up. So you've shared a lot of your perspectives of the events of 9/11 themselves and how you've grown through it, and the business and of Cosmina and what you want Cosmina to do and be. But what would be the one underlying main message you want to send out to the world, combining everything into one main message? What would that be?
That we can heal through trauma. That the kindness of strangers, that no matter what happens, the godness will come in. That we only as humans can imagine when we think forward of the tragedy and the pain, but we never imagine the beauty and grace that follows in the form of the kindness of strangers. That we are here to help each other. And it's really important that when it happens, we allow people to help us. You know, that was one of my biggest lessons. And that's the story of the morning of 9/11. When I allowed myself to receive, everything changed. So what I call the cycle of healing in the book, if I was to have blocked people, if I shut my door and I didn't let people in, I would have been blocking them from getting the soul food that they needed in that crisis. They needed to help somebody. They needed to help me. They were projecting themselves into my situation. It could have been any of us. Everybody'd been to the World Trade Center at some point or in time. It was just a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's how people saw it, I think. I think they projected themselves as it could have been me. And by helping me, they were helping themselves. And by me allowing it, they could feed themselves the nourishment, the emotional, soulful nourishment they needed. And me as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the entire country was hurt by this. So those that were not personally affected like you were, they still were hurting. They still needed to heal. And by helping others, that gave them that opportunity. So it's a good thing you did open up, because you accepting healing helped you. But as you just said, it also helped them. So that's fantastic. And that really is getting into that emotional maturity. You're wanting the world
Yes.
to experience. So I think that's a good first step to show the world what that actually looks like. So that's awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, it happened to all of us.
We covered pretty much most. Yeah.
You covered it's pretty much everything.
It did.
You know, really,
I mean,
my other theme would be. Say it again.
I was going to say, even here in
What did
Canada,
you
we were
say,
affected
Ange?
because we have a lot. I was going to say, even in Canada here, it really affected us here too, because there's so many planes that were stranded. So a lot of communities took in people that were stranded. So it's really was a worldwide healing event, which was really, really nice. So, but go back to if there's anything else that you wanted to add in.
Well, the story, the Broadway show Come From Away, which is about the little town in Newfoundland that took in the 9,000 passengers diverted there, is why I knew the world was ready for a positive story. So that came out in January of 2016, and that's when I started this mission. So that was, 2.5 years ago at this point. But yeah, my on a more global basis, I would really like to reframe struggle. I'd like to reframe trauma and pain as fast tracks to personal growth. And instead of reeling from and backing up from struggle, turn and lean into it. And it's there to teach us. Because if life is our classroom, then struggle is the lesson. And it's in those lessons where our wisdom is found. The life experience, and that's another phase for women especially, but we need to, again, part of the emotional muscle is to understand how valuable life experience is. I can honestly tell you, I don't use anything that I learned in school on a regular basis. I use everything I learned experientially every day. So school's fine, but we're undervaluing our time on the planet, and especially women and young adults who now have a technological world. So we've moved out of the 20th century where it was linear, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. Now we're in the 21st century where things are exponential. 1, 2, 4, 16, 64, 100, whatever. These are no longer linear steps. So we as adults need to reframe our purpose here, really, to help the kids stay grounded and give them the humanity, the side that's human, that's going to offset the side that's technological. So we can do it. We just have to recognize and ask the right questions. Einstein always said if he had an hour to figure out a problem, he would spend 55 minutes thinking of the question. So we can totally do this. We just haven't put our time and our very strong intelligence to it.
That's very interesting. In a time of great technology, this is now when we have to become the most human we've ever been.
Right. Yes. Well, we're all human first. That's what for sure.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, we've got lots of material to work with, so I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but this has been fantastic, and I thank you so very much for taking the time and for the week delay. I appreciate that very much, and I look forward to putting all this together.
Well, thanks so much for your time, you guys, and I will send you the artwork that you need and those photographs via email. Is that what you want?
Yes, please. That would be fantastic. And yeah, I already got those. So yeah, no, that's great. And what I will do, Lisa, is once I've transcribed it and reduced it down to what we're going to use, I will email that to you for you to look through to make sure that you are okay with everything in there first before we use it.
Very good. Well, based on what you've written prior and your other issues, I'm sure it will be great.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. So thanks so much. And Jeff, thank you very much for doing this for us for the magazine. And I hope this was a good experience for you too.
Yeah, I hope I wasn't too boring, Jeff.
Oh, boring. Far from it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not Jeff, but in my perspective,
I'm looking down the picture. Yeah, boring, that's not one of my things.
Right.
A lot, yes, I am a lot. I've got that a
don't.
lot. Yeah, Lisa, you're a lot. I am, yeah. It's all good.
Hey, but that's a good. How else are you going to make a difference in the world, right?
I guess, I know. I just go with it now. I used to try not, just to try to, I was doubting it. Now I just let go and do it anyway. But it's all out of love. It's all because I care.
Good.
You know, that's what somebody said to me. And I said, you know what?
Exactly.
I just really give a damn. Bottom line.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, let me know if you need anything else.
I will. This should be plenty to
Okay.
work with, but if I do, if I need to check anything or verify anything with you, I'll let you know. But I think this is fantastic. Thank you again so very much.
That's great. Thanks you so much too. Thanks you. Thanks, Jeff. You guys have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too. Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye.